Bubba Wallace here from 2311 Racing. Funny thing about being fast, you end up waiting a lot. First to show up, first in line, then just waiting. Me, I rev up Chumba Casino. With over 200 social casino games, no slow lanes here. Why sit around when you can spin? I'm already racing. Your turn. Play for free at ChumbaCasino.com. Let's Chumba.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Rise up! Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site that covers your Arizona Cardinals. And we continue with the opponent preview series where we do 14 shows in 14 days about the Cardinals' 2025 opponents. And in week 6, they will be on the road facing the Indianapolis Colts. In that stretch of early season games where we view them as more winnable than later on in the year. Joining me on this show to talk about the Colts is Paul Bretl. Paul actually was on last year talking about the Packers. He wears a lot of hats, and we're going to hear from him twice in this series as he manages the Colts sister site over the Colts Wire and also from the Jaguars. So Paul is multifaceted, well-versed in NFL knowledge. How are you doing, Paul? And welcome back.
Hey, I appreciate it, Jess. Happy to be here with you.
So let's look back at the Indianapolis Colts season last year. They were 8-9, and they were a team last year, and actually kind of like the past 2 years, where they went 9-8 2 years ago. They went 8-9 last season. It feels like of the teams around the NFL, you're going like, these teams are good, and then the Colts, you're like, they're good, but are they? Wait, are they good?
I think
because they're right in the middle of everything. I guess they're a perfectly mediocre team. Sometimes you're like, yeah, they're good. And then you're like, the next week you're like, but I don't know if they're good. Tell me about last year's 8-9 season.
I think that's a good way to summarize what we've seen, and what few words I would use to describe the team as a whole. And I know the quarterback situation is what is going to draw the attention, but overall it's just been inconsistent and a lack of complementary football. You have these weeks where the defense is operating at a high level, but the offense can't move the ball consistently. You have these weeks where one phase or one part of the game is working really well, but it doesn't all go together, and they just cannot string together those, stretches of wins that you need in the NFL season often to be a playoff team. So that's the big thing that this team has to find. And as we look ahead to the 2025 season, I'll get into this more later, there's a lot to like about this roster, even though, again, we've seen the inconsistency. They haven't been in the playoffs. There's the question marks at quarterback. You can see a path forward for this team.
Right. So they go 8-9. They never go more than one game over 500, and they were only one game over 500 at one point. It's after they beat the Colts, and they're 4-3. They start at 0-2. They go to 4-3, but then they drop to 4-6, and then 5-7, and then 7-9, and then they win in their finale against Jacksonville. Yeah, and there's things to like, and this team, which for a little while has been known for having a pretty good defense, right? Their defense statistically wasn't very good last year. They were 29th in yards allowed and 24th in points allowed. And the offense was a little bit better. They were above average in yards, 13th, and basically league average in points at 17th. Does that start? I guess offensively, that starts with Jonathan Taylor and his dynamic play for over 1,400 yards last season. And then you get to the passing game. No one had 1,000 yards, but you had 3 guys with over 800. But I guess everyone would want to talk about, where is Anthony Richardson at in terms of quarterback play? And I guess last year, what we remember most about Anthony Richardson, because over here in Arizona, there's not a lot of Colts talk, is the time he tapped out of a game at the end of a drive. I didn't think it was that big a deal, but I guess it that was interesting, to say the least, the narrative that was going on for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, throughout the season, you see the flashes that he has and the just the sky high potential that's there with him, and that's what the Colts are still chasing and hoping to again find more of that consistency from. And after he returned from that time off following tapping out of the game and being benched, we did see improved play from him. He led 2 fourth quarter comebacks during that second half of the season that he was a big part of making happen, that ended up being victories for the Colts. You saw someone who seemed more comfortable operating within the pocket. And so he responded well to that. And so when the Colts are bringing in Daniel Jones this offseason, I think it is going to be, sometimes it's coach speak, GM speak about competition. I think that's truly what the Colts want here and what they're trying to facilitate. And they hope that through that competition, Anthony Richardson, as well as Daniel Jones, that their level of play is elevated, right? There's the urgency of you're not guaranteed the starting job. You hope that helps elevate the play of both of those players, and therefore that's going to elevate the play of the offense and really the entire team. So that's the big thing they're looking for. I know with Anthony Richardson, he talked about the footwork component of it has been a big point of emphasis for him this offseason, because for the quarterback position, footwork is, no pun intended, it's the foundation for success when it comes to accuracy. That's a lot of times where it starts. And so that's obviously a big part of his game that has to improve. So that's been one area of emphasis for him as the Colts look to, again, find that consistency.
Defensively, what were the highs and the lows? And on the look of the stat sheet, they were incredible. Tackles were tackles galore, because you got Zaire Franklin leading the NFL with 173 total tackles. You've got 2 linebackers with over 140 tackles. You've got Nick Cross at safety, over 140 tackles, and a cornerback with 100 tackles. What's the good? What's the not so good that happened defensively last year?
Yeah, I think the run defense was up and down at times. They did a good job of coming away with interceptions, but the overall ball production in the secondary, again, wasn't what you want to see. They were bottom 3rd in the NFL in yards per attempt allowed, completion rate, quarterback passer rating, and we're always going to naturally look at the changes to the roster, right? Bringing in Charvarius Ward, Cam Bynum, but I think the defensive coordinator change, bringing in Lou Anarumo from Cincinnati, I think that can really, really help elevate the entire unit. He's going to bring a more aggressive, a more disguise-heavy defensive scheme, varying coverages on the back end. And of course, the hope with that then is your cornerbacks, your safeties are going to be in a better position more often to make plays on the football. But also there's a trickle-down effect of that as well to the pass rush, because you look at pressure rate, sacks. Again, the Colts were, I think they're in the bottom 3rd of the NFL last season in those key metrics, but I don't think that tells the whole story when it comes to the defensive line play. There are a lot of instances where quarterbacks against softer coverages were using the quick passing game to kind of take advantage of that Colts secondary. And obviously from a defensive end tackle perspective, hard to get home when the ball's consistently coming out, and under that 2.5 second mark. So more aggressive defense, more disguises that hopefully can cause some hesitation on the back end, more opportunities for the pass rush to get home. So I think that addition at coordinator and just the scheme change we're going to see, I think, can play a big part in that group elevating this season.
As a Cardinals fan, we were interested in Latu coming out of the draft. How was he as a rookie? I see he had the 4 sacks, 12 quarterback hits, 5 tackles for loss. How was his play as a rookie?
He's someone that you saw progress as you'd want to see, right? As he got more reps under his belt, as he got more in-game experience, and he finished second on the Colts in pressures. I think relative to the defensive end position group lead wide, he ranked 50th in that regard. But one of your reasons, I should say, for optimism that he can make that year 2 jump is PFF has their pass rush win rate metric, right? How often are you beating the guy across from you? Among all defensive ends last season, he ranked 27th. So when you have that consistency, consistently winning your matchups, oftentimes the production's going to follow from that. And again, circling back to what we just discussed with Anarumo's defense, adding, even if there's just an extra split second or 2 for that pass rush to get home, I think he's someone that could really take off this season.
Right. Let's move forward. Coming up next on the Rise Up Series podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's look to the changes that made in the offseason, free agency, and the draft. That's coming up next on Rise Up Series. We're back on the Rise Up Series podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web, talking about the Indianapolis Colts with Paul Bretl from Colts Wire. He alluded to a change that was made, the move from Gus Bradley to Lou Anarumo. Well-respected defensive coordinator, interestingly enough, had a really bad defense in Cincinnati last year. And he's already Paul's talked about what that change could look like schematically, but they're also going to look a little bit different. They lost linebacker EJ Speed. They lost one of their defensive line, Odeyingbo. They lost offensive lineman Ryan Kelly in free agency, Will Freeze in free agency. They got the massive contract with the Vikings, a guy that the Cardinals were in on. And they lost Raekwon Davis, who to non-football Nelson was released. And in addition to Joe Flacco, any of those guys offensively, defensively going to be viewed as impact losses?
I think the big ones from that group are the offensive linemen that you mentioned. I mean, you're losing 2 veteran starters, and that offensive line unit has been, particularly going into last season, it was a position of strength for this Colts team, and it still can be. But presumably the starters at now center and right guard are going to be Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonsalves, 2 second-year players. So 2 still relatively inexperienced players. And anytime you have inexperience, there's unknowns that come with that. Now, having said that, Bortolini in his opportunities last season, 8 appearances, 6 starts, very, very much held his own. But again, he's playing a center position where there's a lot on that player's plate, right? All centers, pre-snap, making the calls, the adjustments, the protection changes, anything that's needed. And then within Shane Steichen's offense, a lot is asked of the center position, specifically in the run game. And then with Gonsalves, he's making a full position change. I mean, he played only 44 snaps in college at Pittsburgh at the guard position. He played only 1 snap last year at the guard position. So this is a full position change for him. Now, the coaching staff has talked about, again, we don't see what happens on the practice field in season very much, but he took a lot of guard snaps last year. They saw him progress in that role. His play style, his mentality very much fits what the Colts want to have at that guard position. So they're confident that he can step into that role. And again, the glimpses that we saw from each of these players last year in their rookie year, having a full off season of the continuity of being in the same system, a full off season to hone your craft, you can see why the Colts are going this route and wanting to lean on them as part of their core offensive line unit. But again, the unknown, just given the lack of experience, is one of those things that it's going to have to be answered as we get into the NFL season.
Free agency, they also added a pair of defensive backs. Those were their largest moves as they brought over former 49ers starting cornerback Travarius Ward, 3 years, $54 million. And then also at the safety position, former Vikings Cam Bynum, 4 years, $60 million. They also bring in Corey Ballantyne, small deal from the Packers. They bring in as well Neville Gallimore, small, basically minimal deal previously with the Rams to add to that defensive front. Same with Eric Johnson. But honestly, the move that got the most attention was the addition of Daniel Jones, because, well, one, after the Giants released him and he was on the Vikings practice squad, you get the notion, and Paul, you alluded to it, the idea is to create real competition. And right now in the offseason, the vibe that I'm hearing from the offseason, might Daniel Jones end up winning that job?
I mean, I think that's very much in play. I mean, Richardson missed most of OTAs and he missed all of mini camp, dealing with a shoulder injury. He re-aggravated not anywhere near to the extent, but re-aggravated the shoulder that he had surgery on during his rookie season in 2023. And so Daniel Jones got all of those first team reps, and Shane Steichen was, in his words, was very pleased with what he saw from Jones. So just given those extra opportunities that Jones got that Richardson didn't going into training camp, one would presume that Jones is, at least at this stage of the game, has the upper hand. Now, having said that, what happened in late May, what happened in early June, OTA's minicamp, is not going to define or dictate who the starting quarterback is week one. I fully believe that the Colts truly want this to be a head-to-head competition for the starting job. And once Richardson's back on the field, I think they're fully going to lean into that. And the plan was, prior to Richardson's injury, that these guys were going to be splitting first team reps. I mean, equal practice reps every single day. And ultimately, as Steichen has said, what they're looking for, it's consistency day in and day out, consistency, being able to move the offense up and down the field. And so whoever can end up providing that is going to be the starter come week one. And I think Jones is going to have a chance to do that, because you look at just his experience, right? He's got 69 starts under his belt at this point. And so, that's an advantage that he's going to have over Anthony Richardson in that regard.
Interestingly enough, at least from the outside looking in, that they're looking for consistency from two of the quarterbacks that have offered some of the fewest number. They have been some of the least consistent starting quarterbacks that we've seen in recent years. I know competition, that I guess that's one of the reasons from the outside looking in that the Colts they're kind of in the same situation, because you can do everything, but with the quarterback position, like Anthony Richardson could be great, but he's also been wildly inconsistent. And what is it to talk about Daniel Jones since he came in the league? Oh, he's great. No, he's awful. He's somewhere in between. He's actually both. He's both good and terrible. That's because the floor is so low with their play, and the ceiling is pretty high as well. That's wild. It's wild how having these two particular quarterbacks battling for the starting job is for Indianapolis.
Yeah, and it's the big unknown with this team. And I was gonna get into this later, but there's a lot to like about this roster. As I said, I mean, the offensive line unit, you can see them being, again, a steady presence. Jonathan Taylor was fourth in rushing yards. You mentioned the wide receivers. I believe the Colts were the only team in the NFL who had 3 receivers eclipse that 800-yard mark last year. And then A.D. Mitchell, their fourth wideout, a second-round pick from 2024, is a high upside player. And then we talk about the defensive side of the ball, the improvement that is expected this season with Anarumo, the additions made in the secondary. Like, the infrastructure around the quarterback position is there for that player to be successful. I don't believe that the Colts need great quarterback play for this team to have the opportunity to stack some wins this season. They just need somewhat steady play from that position, right? Because you have the pass catchers, Tyler Warren, who they added at tight end in the NFL draft. Like, the player overall, the roster construction is there for this team, I believe. But again, the ceiling, how good can they be, for every team is going to be determined by the quarterback play. And that's something, that's on Shane Steichen's plate as the head coach, as the play caller, to figure out, all right, whoever is under center come week one, how do I get the most out of these guys and put them in the best position to be successful?
So we can turn to the draft now. You referred to Tyler Warren, their top pick, tight end out of Penn State, number 14 overall. Going into that kind of felt like if it wasn't going to be Tyler Warren, it was going to be Colston Love. But it felt like Tyler Warren at 14 was a perfect match, and it worked out that way. How much of an impact do you think that he will? Is he going to be Brock Bowers like, or is that way too much to expect out of a rookie tight end?
I think that's too much to expect, just because the ceiling that Bowers reached last year was really, really impressive. But I fully expect Warren to come in day one to have an impact on this Colts offense, both in the passing game and as a blocker. I mean, his match for what Shane Steichen wants to do offensively is perfect, right? He can provide that passing presence that the Colts greatly needed at the tight end position. Their entire tight end group last season, the 4 players on the roster combined, didn't even eclipse 500 receiving yards last season. So he's going to help very much in that regard. And Chris Ballard, the GM, has talked about, particularly over the middle of the field, his size, his reliability as a pass catcher is where he can be a real threat. But in addition to that, he's really versatile. He lined up everywhere during his time at Penn State. He's a very, very capable run blocker. And when you have a tight end who can, do it all, right? Handle a bunch of different responsibilities, there's a level of unpredictability that the offense now gains, because defenses can't necessarily decipher what's coming, who's filling what role, just based on, all right, who's on the field or where players lined up, because he can do so many different things. And so that's going to help expand the playbook for Shane Steichen. It's going to help create opportunities, not just for Tyler Warren, but I think for other pass catchers and even in the run game, just with, again, that do-it-all type presence that he brings to the position. So I expect him to be someone who comes out and has a big impact. And again, the versatility, the blocking component, that stuff doesn't show up on the stat sheet necessarily, but those are other ways where his presence is very much going to be felt.
Colts went heavy on the Big Ten early on, as in round 2, they took Ohio State edge JT Tuimoloau, a player that Cardinals fans, if you remember, was kind of a target because the Cardinals needed edge work, and Tuimoloau goes to the Colts in round 2. Adding to that core, you had Laiatu Latu last year. You've got Kwity Paye, who's still kind of up there. Does he figure into that rotation this year, and how much do you expect from him as a rookie?
Yeah, I think he'll immediately be a part of that rotation. If we look at our starters on paper, I think it's going to be Latu and Kwity Paye, but we all know defensive end, 4, sometimes even 5 guys on NFL teams see regular snaps each week. So he's going to be a part of that group. And during his time at Ohio State, he was another player from the defensive end perspective with a very well-rounded skill set. And you look at PFF's numbers as a pass rusher, generating pressures, his ability in the run game. He was a 3-down player, and he also brings some flexibility to potentially move inside. And I think with Lou Anarumo's defense, we're going to see more movement along that defensive front. So perhaps there's the opportunity for him to get, some snaps inside on like obvious passing situations where you want more of a pass rushing presence on the field. But he's absolutely going to be a part of that rotation, competing for playing time with Abukam as well as Taekwon Lewis.
Then they had Minnesota cornerback Justin Wally in round 3. Is he expected to make any sort of contribution defensively this season?
I think we'll see contributions from him. He's someone during offseason programs, from coaches, from players, he's garnered a lot of high praise. And he was a draft pick in the 3rd round when he was taken, that compared to the consensus big boards that were out there, he went much, much earlier than what was anticipated. He's a bit undersized, but has really good speed. And again, we talk about fit with Lou Anarumo's defense and his ability, again, that speed to be sticky in man coverage, good ball production. The Colts view him as a versatile player, someone you can move around, which again is good for that, more disguise heavy approach that we're going to see. And I think there's the opportunity for him to carve out a role. Now, whether it's a starting role, that second cornerback spot opposite of Travarius Ward is a bit up in the air. Jalen Jones, who started last season, could come in and secure that role. There's Justin Wally, there's Juju Brents as well. So there's going to be competition for that playing time. But in this defense, and Anarumo's talked about this, it's going to be a much greater reliance on the defensive back position. We're going to see more varying coverages, more opportunities when I think there's more defensive backs on the field. And so I think in some capacity, he's going to carve out a role this season, but to what extent, still to be determined, based on training camp. And then once we get into the year.
The day 3 picks, Iowa State tackle Jalen Travis, Kansas State running back DJ Giddens, Notre Dame quarterback Riley Leonard, Alabama defensive lineman Tim Smith, and Wisconsin safety Hunter Wooler. Any of those day 3 picks figure to make any sort of impact this year?
Yeah, the 2 that I'm looking at is DJ Giddens. We know Jonathan Taylor is going to be leading the way at running back, but back at the NFL Combine, Chris Ballard said we need more production from that backup running back role. So Giddens is going to be competing with Khalil Herbert, who they signed in free agency, and then Tyler Goodson for that second running back spot. But he also brings a pass catching presence, which is an element that this Colts offense didn't really have out of the backfield last season. So I think there's a few different ways that he can contribute. And again, what his playing time looks like, is he the full on running back 2 come week 1? Still to be seen, but he's someone who I expect to have a role. The other player is Tim Smith, the defensive tackle. DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, one of the best defensive tackle combos, out there. But the depth behind those two is something that has to improve this season. And Tim Smith, his bread and butter in college was as a run defender. And again, that movement along the defensive line, he played across multiple gaps. Again, fits well with what Anarumo wants to do. So I think there's an opportunity for him to carve out playing time as maybe that secondary run defender after Grover Stewart. And again, that's a position, that defensive tackle, 3rd spot in the rotation, 4th spot in the rotation, where the Colts have to get improved play this season.
On next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web, let's look ahead to 2025 and the expectations for the Colts and how they compare to Arizona. That's coming next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web, talking to Paul Bretl from Colts Wire as we look now at the Colts' expectations for 2025. They, of course, play in an extremely winnable AFC South. The Texans have kind of been the guys right now. But if you look at from top to bottom, Texans, Colts, Jaguars, and Titans, that division is one that most certainly could be won. What are the reasonable expectations from this Colts team this year? And on a secondary question, is the seat for Shane Steichen getting a little bit warm in terms of his job security?
I'll answer those questions in one answer. The Colts have to win now. Now, whether they're going to and make the playoffs, that's still to be determined, but they have to win now. Chris Ballard, his team as GM, they haven't made the playoffs since 2020. During his tenure, going on his 9th season as GM of the Colts, they have one playoff win. The Colts haven't won the AFC South since 2014. They have to find a way to get in the playoffs and win now. And if they don't, fully expect a major organizational shift, a change of general manager. And that doesn't always mean a change of head coach, but most GMs coming in, right, they want their own guys. They want to bring in their own coaching staff, everyone around them. So if I had to guess, if it were to go down that path, I would expect there to be, major changes. So the Colts absolutely find themselves in a position where they have to make the playoffs, just given how, again, the last few seasons have unfolded. And with that, you can see the added sense of urgency that Ballard's operated with. I mean, if we look back at last free agency, 2024, the only outside free agent additions made were Joe Flacco, who is your backup quarterback, and Raekwon Davis, a rotational defensive tackle. He banked heavily on internal development, his guys that he already had on the roster elevating and taking that next step forward. But again, that didn't happen. So this season, we see him go out, spend the money to bring in Ward, spend the money to bring in Bynum. Shane Steichen made the change at defensive coordinator. So in that sense, you can feel the urgency that's there. And like I said earlier, there's a lot to like about what this Colts team has around the quarterback position. If they can just find a way to get some steady play from that position. It's not obviously always the easiest thing to do, but the reason I keep emphasizing it is because this is a well put together roster. And I don't think they need, again, that, great play to elevate the players around them to get them to the playoffs. Steady play, I think, can help them put together wins and be in a position to, make a run at the playoffs.
They don't have an easy schedule because they do play teams like in the NFC West. They have a road game against the Chiefs. They play the AFC West and the NFC West. That is not going to be an easy route because they open the season at home against the Dolphins, winnable. Broncos, tough. But they do play in the AFC South, so there are winnable games on that. They have relatively winnable games. What do you think is the floor and ceiling in terms of wins for this team?
Gosh, that's a great question. I mean, the floor maybe be in the 5-6 range if they just don't get any sort of consistency from the quarterback position. But I could also see them on the other side of things being a 10-win team. I think I did a prediction for them after the offseason and once we saw the schedule. And I think that 10-win range is very, like I said, I think that's reasonable as well if they get that consistency at quarterback.
Awesome. And as you look at that matchup, as Colts fans looked at the schedule when that Week 6 matchup against the Cardinals, how is that game viewed? I'm not looking for a prediction, but is that a game that they look at? Oh, that's a definite win, should win, toss up, or that's going to be tough?
I think if you're the Colts and the approach that they have to take is that they have to go out and win every game, and they can't take opponents lightly. I mean, a prime example of that last season against the New York Giants, the Colts were it was a must-win game to keep their playoff hopes alive. It's late in the season. The Giants have, I forget what it was, maybe 2-3 wins at the time, whatever it was. Colts go into New York, end up losing that game, and with that, their playoff hopes were dashed. You obviously never want that to happen, but you hope that that it's at least a learning opportunity, right? And that you take no game lightly, and every game needs to be treated as a must-win, and you can lose on any given Sunday. So not just about the Cardinals, but in general, that's the approach that mindset that the Colts have to have every week this season.
So, and with that, we will wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Series podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk to the web, in our 6th of our 14 shows. That is Paul Bretl from the Colts Wire. You can find his work. Go to Colts Wire for that Colts coverage. And Paul, on social media, can our listeners find you there?
Yeah, head to the Colts Wire on Twitter to follow all our work there as well.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Paul. We will hear back from Paul in a few days when we have our Jaguar show. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again soon.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Rise